So we are on project number 3, and I had this idea that we could maybe perhaps do something different this time. And I know you're either going to hate it or you're going to love it and embrace it. But I prepared the project as per usual, but I thought maybe this time we are going to do it the other way around. So that I'm going to give you the hints, I'm going to explain what is needed to be done, but you are going to sit down and think about it and then write lines of code and see how it turns out. So I hope you're open to new ideas, and well, I'm the kind of person that I absolutely love new ideas and the chance to be challenged and get out of my comfort zone. And as soon as I sit down, usually I can't do anything. I'm getting super frustrated. And so, there are those two kinds of people who are, although they are reluctant and then they can do everything, or they are super fascinated by the task and then they sit down and they don't know where to start. But I can assure you that brain likes to get lazy. So you can get used to watching me do things first, and you think, okay, I'm doing okay because I'm typing everything all along. I understand what she's saying. I could do it myself. But it's very different when you have nothing there and you have to kind of get creative and also put everything what you've just learned into practice and type things yourself. So I totally encourage you to be the type of person who gets really excited, or maybe not even excited, but at least looking forward to the challenge. If you are not looking forward to the challenge, at least you do try. That's all I'm asking, that you try, and before you go on to the next video, you are there to solve the problem. Of course, if you get stuck and you have 5 minutes of staring at an empty screen, cool, then go on. But at least try. Okay, so on the right we have a browser, and this is the final task. So this is what it's supposed to look like at the very end. We have that button start, and when I click the button for the first time, we see 10 elements coming up. Then I click again, we still have 10 elements, but they are getting slightly bigger. So every time the font size is increasing. Not the number of elements, but the font size, right? So let's have a look. Well, our main.js is very scary at the moment because it's got nothing. Only one comment that your solution is to be here. So you have to start from 0, an absolute 0. And I've prepared this index.html file. And what we've got here is button that doesn't have any ID or class, nothing. Just plain button with caption start. Then we have a UL unordered list with 10 list items, right? So that's it for now. That's all we have. And in styles, all we have in styles is that li display attribute is set to none. So basically at the start of the project, even though we have those LIs here, they are set to be invisible. So we cannot see anything. So basically at the start, it's just a plain window, nothing on there. I wouldn't just leave you like this with no help, so don't worry. Here in green, you have a description or some hints or something that can help you, how to approach the topic and how the steps helping you to get through it. So the list has already been created in the HTML structure and it's invisible by default. The display set to none makes it invisible. After clicking on the button is already there. Button is here, right? We have to make each element li visible, setting the display property to block. So basically you change display from none to block and those li's will come up to the screen. After each click on the button, the font size is going to grow by 1. So we want to increase, every time we click on the button, we want to increase the font size by 1 pixel. What I want you to do is to set the initial value in JS. We don't do anything here in the CSS. I want you to set it in JS to 10 pixels and store it in a variable, so that when we increase that increment, the font size, we actually gonna increase the value of that variable. We're gonna work on variables. Please do not change anything in this HTML and CSS. You can only change main.js. So everything you're gonna create goes to main.js, okay? And well, we are practicing here for loops and for each method, and I would like you to try doing the task first with a for loop and then with for each method. So I know this is a lot to ask and it might seem little scary, but you should definitely try, and then it's a kind of like a test for yourself how much of the things we've been discussing so far has settled down or settled in, and how much of it is just still a little like in the gray area. So good luck. Cool. So I hope your mental state is currently in good shape, and regardless of how it went, I hope you've gathered strength and you spent some time thinking about it. If you managed to the whole thing, amazing. If you didn't, do not worry, it's not a race, and slow and steady, and we'll get there. We all get there eventually. So let's get down to work. So basically, again, what do we have in here? We have that start button that doesn't do anything at the moment, just yet. And we know that we will work on that button element, so we probably want to store it in a variable. And a const variable because we won't be changing it later on. So document, and because it doesn't have any ID, let's go with a query selector. And let's select our button element. Just so you know, if you wanted to select a button, you could do select query selector all and then specify index. So let's say we only have one button, so I'm going to put index 0, and we still are going to get our button in here. As you can see, it's the right start button stored in our variable. And so it's just one way to do it. And if you want to store a different, like a second or third button, it's also a way. And for us, it isn't the most optimal solution. So we're going to just use query selector since we have only one button. Cool. So we have our button stored, and we also know there are 10 li items. They're just not visible to our eyes, but we still want to perform some actions on them, so we probably want to store them as well. So this far, I'm sure you've got li items, and again, document query selector all this time because we want to get more than just one element, and a li. So this was easy. And now we have to think about the next steps. We have that mini instruction here. Is there anything kind of useful? So the list is already created, we know that, and we know that it's invisible at the moment, but we need to set the display to block after clicking on the button. Cool, so we know that we need to set a method on our button element. What's that method called? It's add event listener. We are going to listen for an event. We're listening for a click, so let's put click as our first parameter, and as a second parameter we're going to use an arrow function, and as the first thing I'm going to try to console log a message works, just to check whether we correctly attached our method to the right element. Cool, so the event is listened for. We are listening for a click. Everything set up correctly. And let's comment this out. And again, we have to think, what are we supposed to do in here? Let's go back to our instruction. We want to make each element alive visible. So we know that we need to set the display property to block, since it's invisible at the moment by the value of none. Cool, so let's say li items. We want to get the style attribute, and to display attribute, let's set it to, as we are expected to set it to block. Have it block. Let's see what happens when I click on that element. We have an error. We have an error because we cannot just set display block on the entire thing. What's the items? The items is a node list. So we cannot just set property display to block on the entire node list. We have to do it on every individual li. If I did, okay, I want to set first item with index 0. I'm gonna do the same with few times over and see how it goes. So I'm gonna click on start now, and we will see that 3 elements from the list are showing. So we could do the same thing with all elements up to an index 9, but this wouldn't be good programming. That would be an example of very bad programming. So what we need to do is to use a for loop, at least at first. So we have for, and let's set our iterator. Let I equals 0. I goes on as long as the list items length. Cool, and we want to increment I by 1 each time. And only inside that for loop, and we want to be able to have an impact on every single individual list item. Okay, I removed the entire thing, but what we need is an actual universal index that will be substituted here. So this I is going to be substituted at every iteration with a different index number. So first it's going to be 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, and so on and so on and so on. So let's see if we manage to create the list now. Cool, we have 10 elements. If we go to elements in here, and we will see our UL, let's expand it. Every li has style attribute and a property of display set to block. And if I click again and again, nothing is going to happen if this just stays as it is, because once it's blocked, it's going to be blocked and it's not going to be ruined by another iteration. So every time I click on the start, once the display is set to block, nothing is spoiled. Our code is fine. There's no error, or it's not like it's going to be toggled back to none and so on. So we could set an if statement to make a condition to just set that style display to block once, but we could also leave it like this and it's still gonna work perfectly fine. Cool. The second thing we were supposed to take care of was after each click on the button, the font size is going to be increased by 1. So initial value is supposed to be 10 pixels. We're supposed to store it in a variable, and then after every click it's supposed to grow by 1. Cool. So since we were asked to do a variable, we probably need to use a let this time because we're gonna modify this font size every time. Let's create let size. Let's set it to 10. I'm not gonna put 10 pixels in a string because normally if we are working with variables, we are using numbers and we're just adding the pixels in a template string or just as a simple concatenation, the old school style. But let's set size to 10, and now let's do li items every index 1 by 1 style font size. Remember about the camel case, and we're gonna set it to size plus in commas pixels. So let's go back to our console. I'm gonna click on it. Nothing is happening, but you can see that the elements are slightly smaller, so the current size is 10 pixels. And what we need to do is to be able to increase the size by 1 every time. So on every iteration? Let's do that. Let's do size plus plus. We know that this is going to increase the size by 1 every time the loop is going to be run. Let's save it and let's see what happens. I'm just going to make the console slightly smaller. I'm pressing start and we can see that every element is different. It's no longer the same size, and what we wanted to achieve was them all growing by 1 at the same time. So this is not exactly the result that we were looking for or the outcome we intended for. Basically, if we leave that size plus plus inside our for loop, on every iteration, it's gonna be increased by 1. So the first iteration takes element 1 and sets the font size to 10 pixels. Then it's increased by 1, so its size now 11 pixels, and it goes back and it takes the second element, so element 2, already finding the size at size 11. Again, it's increased by 1, so it's 12 now. It goes for an element 3, and so on and so on and so on. So every element is taken in turn by every new iteration, and the size is growing each time. So what we need to do is we need to get rid of it and place it outside our for loop. So it does happen on every click on the button, but not every time the loop is going back and forth getting a new element. So basically it's supposed to happen once on every click, but not 10 times. Gonna save it and let's see how is this looking now. Right, better now. well, element 1, 2, 3, and 4, and up to 10, all growing by 1 pixel on every click on the button. Cool. Is there anything else we're supposed to do in this project? Let's go back to my index.html file. So we have that the list is visible, definitely on every click on the button.js, blah, blah, blah. Use variable we did, and size is going to grow by 1. We didn't change anything in HTML or CSS. Cool. Do the task first with a loop and then with the for each. So basically, our solution is ready and we just need to now prepare the other solution. So I'm gonna comment this out and let's get down to a for each. For each, how do we do it? How did you do it? Basically, again, we are working on the button element, so it goes the same. Button, add event listener. Again, we are listening for a click after all, and we do need to perform an action, so we place a function as the second parameter. Let's open it. And inside here goes the block of code responsible for doing everything that we're supposed to do. Let's save it. Again, our start button is not working because our function is empty. What we need to do for each is a method to work on an array or a pseudo array. We happen to have one pseudo array ready waiting for us. So let's paste it in here and do a for each. For each takes in a callback function. So a function that is supposed to be fired on for all of those elements that are inside the array. So we're gonna do an arrow function and open another block of code, another curly braces. Cool. Since we are working here on every single individual element, it works this way that we actually need to specify. It doesn't matter what the word you are going to use, you just have to be consistent. So if you're going to use this word here, then you have to make the reference with the same word in the code. So I'm going to go with, since it's an li items plural, I'm going to go with one li item singular. And again, we want to do exact same thing on here. It's been common. So we want the li item. This time I'm not making the reference to the index one by one, but to a specific li item, because for each is going to take every element in the array anyway, one by one. So we don't have to put what index. There you go. And let's see how it works. If it works, we can see all elements visible, but they are not growing just yet. So we probably need to place that size ++. We need to do the incrementation on our size let. Let's save it. Let's see. And finally, we're here. It's working. I'm sure that now you've seen me do it. You're like easy peasy. And the next task is gonna be very much related to this one. We're again gonna try the same approach. So you're gonna try to do it first and then we'll do it together. So I'm sure it's this one. If this one went very well, the other one will go perfect for you. I'm gonna insist that this is a good way to learn how to program. So again, for this task, I would love for you to sit down, think of possible solutions, how to approach this, and actually try approaching it. So try to write your code. Remember that even if you do not get the whole thing done and ready, it's still okay if you have like those mini bits and pieces that you are going to put down. Just thinking about it, engaging your brain is like an exercise for your neurons and creating new connections inside your brain, which is going to be super, super beneficial, and it's going to pay off in the future. And remember that your future job requires a lot of like searching for stuff, because it's not that you have to remember the exact structure of some method of or how it worked. It's more like you thinking, okay, I remember something and it could maybe possibly work this time. And even if you don't remember the exact name of it, it's still like you have to learn how to search for things. And I know it's a little uncomfortable to get out of your comfort zone of just watching and typing things alongside me. And even if you do just that, it's still amazing because it's always progress. But I promise you, you can get there much faster. The sooner you start to exercise your brain, the better. Because I know there are many geniuses out there, but for most of us mortals, there is no other way but to sit and try and learn by trial and error. So there will be many errors coming up in the console, but the more errors, the better, because it's all about practice. So I'm going to show you what's the task at hand. Now I'm going to add 10 elements to the list. So we have that huge button in the window. And once I press it, we again have 10 elements, which are now one. Every other is like, every next element is bigger than the previous one. So 1 is the smallest one, it goes up to 10, and number 10 is the biggest on the list. When I click again, we have another 10 elements, and now they are from 11 to 20. So there is a continuation of the numbering. Cool. So this is it. And let's have a look at the HTML. This is very poor at the moment. It's got nothing. And actually that's what it's supposed to remain, because you're not supposed to add anything on here. We have no element in the body. They are supposed to be created in the main.js and then attached to the body, but nothing by like applying the HTML tags. Nothing like this, and no styles. So every change is happening in main.js. Got no elements and no CSS here, and we're not supposed to change that. We only do everything in JS. Cool. So I'm gonna take you to main.js, which is not entirely empty, and it might seem a little scary. We have 4 elements. Let size 10, as probably going to be about the font size. Let element number 1, that's probably going to be an index of every li on the list. Then we've got that function init that is going to be run as soon as the page is being loaded. And once it is, this is to initialize the process. And then we've got a create li element, which is gonna be inside that init function. Don't worry, I do not want you to feel alone. You're not alone. We have a set of like mini instructions in the index HTML. So you are to create a solution with two functions based on the structure in main.js, and do not add anything else to the global scope. In the global scope in main.js, we have 4 elements, those 2 variables and 2 functions, and you're not supposed to add anything else to the global scope. Only here and here. So the body of the function init and the body of the function create li element. Cool. Init function that will be run after page load, and the tasks for that function is to create 2 items, button and ul, the list. So inside that init function, you're supposed to create a button and the list and add them to the body. We've done it before. You are able to create elements, HTML elements using JS. You are able to add them later on to the body. And also inside that function, you are supposed to set the listening event for an event on the button. So on that button that you're creating in the same function, then you are setting the add event listening method on the button. So that's it in the init function. And then create li elements function is going to be run when the button created in the init function is clicked. So when you click the add 10 elements to the list, the create li elements function will be run. And its task is to create those 10 li elements. I'm going to refresh and see you've got 10 elements. So this is the responsibility of the second function, create li elements. You have to place them in a ul element, so you have to attach them to the list. And each of the 10 elements has an index, and the next 10 elements are to be a continuation. So as you can see, they're 1 up to 10, and then when you click again, it starts from 11 and it doesn't go from 0 again or from 1, but it goes on 10, 11 up to 20, and when you click again, you'll see 21, 22, and so on. Each subsequent li element should have a font size larger by 1 pixel. So we start at 10 pixels, element 2 has 11 pixels, element 3 has 3 pixels. You should have a slight idea how to achieve this if you paid attention to the previous task. Okay, and no changes to the HTML file, so do not add any HTML or CSS. Everything in the main.js. Well, good luck. Cool. I think this isn't as scary, and it's a little bit more comforting when you have some lines of code already in the main.js. Although there is nothing in our window browser this time, so still a little scary. It's still like, if you think about it, it's nothing there. It's just like, we're the masters of puppets here. We are in control. We can do anything and everything. So let's go back to index.html and see the instructions. So we have that function init, and it's supposed to create 2 items, 2 elements. We've got a button element and a list. Cool. We know how to do it, don't we? We are going to create a const called button, btn, short for a button, and then accessing document, and one of its many methods, we're gonna access the create element method, and in the parentheses we're gonna indicate what element we want to create. In this case, we want a new button. We have button. I would print out the content of the button, or what it's looking right now, what it looks like right now. But because it's inside the function, and we know that inside the function is like inside your own home, so we cannot get there. It's not going to be defined. But anyway, our button doesn't really exist anywhere yet because we didn't specify where we want it. And we want it to be attached to the document body. If you did the same thing in the HTML, you wouldn't even think about it because it would be so obvious that you have to place a button in the body tag. Here, it isn't so obvious, is it? So here we've got a document body, and we want to refer to the method of append child. Again, in the parentheses, we gonna be very explicit and very specific. We want to attach our button element. So I'm gonna use my button variable, and you can see that one tiny kind of sad button in the window. Cool. Almost pathetic. Let's fix it. We're gonna give it some text. Button text content. And what was it supposed to say? Add 10 list items. Cool. You do that. Save it. It's looking much better already. Let's do button. Let's get inside the style object and the font size property. And let's set it to maybe, I don't know, 22 pixels. Make it slightly bigger. What do you think? Do you think 28 would be better? Slightly better. We could add many more styles, but let's not bother. The next thing we were supposed to create was the list. Right, so I'm just gonna copy this and make modifications. So instead of btn, I'm gonna put ul, and instead of the button, I'm gonna put again ul. Right, so we have a list. Then again, we want to add our ul to the document body. Instead of btn, we're gonna place ul, save it. So if you checked in the element, or we can do it straight away, element, and we've got a button, and we have a ul, so unordered list. It's been added. It's invisible because it's empty. It's currently empty, so we can't see it, but it's there. Right. Okay. Going back to the index HTML and finding the next thing. We created 2 items and we added both of them to the body, and we're now supposed to set the listening on the button. Cool. We know how to do it. We work on the button and we are using our add event listener method. Inside here, we know that the first parameter is the event we are listening for, and we are again listening for a click. And the second parameter is the action. So what's supposed to happen when we click on the button? So far, we only know that the create ally element is the action for the button, so we can place it here. Cool. So that's our function init kind of ready, and we can move on to create ally element function. It's going to be run when the button created by the init function is clicked. it's gonna be run when we click on the button created in the init, and specify that a create ally element is the function to be fired when we click on the button. So far everything is correct. I think we're moving in the right direction. Well, let's read further on. Creating 10 ally elements and placing them in a list. Cool. Again, this is the part where we would love to just create 10 elements. Like, I don't know, tell JS, could you just 10 elements like li times 10 or something, but it's not gonna work like this. So we are going to use a for loop, and again we're gonna define our iterator equals 0, so we're gonna start from index 0. We're gonna go on, we want 10 elements, so it means we want to go up to 9. So I less than 10 is gonna go up to 9. Starting from 0 means, so it means that it's gonna create those 10 elements. Don't worry, everything is okay. And then increment by 1, I plus plus is gonna solve the thing for us. Then inside here, if we wanted to create 10 ally elements, what do you think should be the next step? You may have already come up with this solution. So I'm gonna again copy this from here and just substitute the correct elements with correct naming. I want to create an ally, so I'm gonna name my variable ally, and I will say that I want to create element is specified by the ally tag. Save it, and next step would be to append child. But this time we don't want to add our ally to the body element like we did before, but we actually want to append it to the list. Can we just do ul and take it from here? Well, we cannot. We were asked not to create any global variables, and nothing that is happening here cannot get inside the init function and get like this from here. It's just not gonna work this way. So we, instead of stealing this ul from here, we have to make a new reference. So document, we could create a new variable, but we can just get there by query selector and specific ul, and then work on that element. We want to append child to our list, and what do we want to append? We want to append li, so li goes inside here in the parentheses. I hope everything is clear so far, because it's all very simple. It's just at the beginning it may not seem that way. Cool. So far we have created a for loop that will go 10 times, hoping to create 10 li elements, appending each of those elements to our newly created list. The list is going to be created by the init function, and init function is run first. Hence, when it gets to this point of finding the create ally elements here, it's gonna have no problem finding ul, because it's already gonna be created by the other function, and the other function is run before this function. Right, let's save it, and let's see if we have any visual outcome. So we have those dots, which we know is a decoration for the list item, and we didn't put any text content in our li, so it's still empty, but we can see that 10 items have been created successfully. So this is one thing that we achieved already, and now we have to think about the other things that are missing. And I feel like these are just details for this project. It's like minor details, because the most important was to create elements in here, attach the click, think about the loop, that we need to create those 10 elements, not by typing them, but actually automating the process. And so now we only have to add some text content. Li text content equals, and I'm gonna use a template string, element number, and I'm gonna use that variable from here because it's there for a reason. Since I'm using a template string, so I need a dollar sign and curly braces. Inside the curly braces, I'm directly injecting the value of the element number. And let's see what this is gonna do for us. So for now we have element number 1 10 times, because element number is set to 1 at the start, and when it iterates 10 times, it's always gonna paste the same value, meaning 1. And we want this value to be increased on every iteration, so we need to use an incrementation. 2 pluses. Let's save it. Let's click again. And let's see what happens. Amazing. We have now element number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. What's going to happen if I'm going to click again? Amazing. It's incrementing further. We have element 11, 12, 13, up to 20, up to 30. So another part of this project ready, and we still wanted to have a different font size for every other, for the next element on the list. We wanted the font size to be increased by 1. So what next? Li style attribute font size property set to. What do we think of that? Let's use a template string, and again we need a dollar and curly braces, and we need that variable from here. We need to add pixels, because font size has to be expressed by pixels. See if it's gonna work in any way. It's not working, because again it's always taking the value of 10, and we need that value to be increasing on every iteration. So again, I'm gonna increment it. So now it's supposed to just grow by 1 on every iteration. Let's save it. Let's hit the button, and it's looking pretty good. Right. It's growing, the number is growing, the font size is growing. I wonder if you did the task in the similar or in the same way. If not, don't worry. Probably there isn't any other method you would know to create an element, but to create element, but you could use another method than just for, I don't know, there are probably other ways to solve this. So if you are this creative, then congratulations. And if you weren't able to come up with this solution, let's just analyze it one more time. So we have that function init that is executed as soon as the page is loaded, right? Got init, and the braces are there to just execute, to call the function straight away. So the program goes on finding the init function, and we are asking to create a button element, to add it to the list, to fill it out with the text content, so it's not an empty button, but it has a text of add 10 list items, and we made it slightly bigger. We could center it, we could do many other things, make it colorful. Right, so then we created a list that was at this point in time an empty list. We added it to the body, still it was empty, and we set a click event listener. So we wanted to listen for a click event on the button, and when the click happens, we wanted to execute the second function, create li element. Create li element went 10 times over in the loop, created 10 li elements. It just happened so quickly that we couldn't see that it was happening one by one. Then we added the li element to our list, and then fill it out with the content using a template string. We used that variable that was already there put for us at the beginning of the project with the value of 1. That was the number of the element. On every iteration, we decided to increment that number so that every time there is a different number showing. And then we got inside the style attribute of font size and set it to size. We needed to add px for pixels. And again, we incremented the size by 1 on every iteration, so that every time we click the button, the font size is getting bigger. It doesn't matter at what point you stopped or if you managed the whole project on your own. I mean, if you did, then amazing, excellent, brilliant job. If you didn't, it was a very difficult, very challenging task, and I will see you at the next project.